The Conservative Political Action Conference gets underway with addresses from two rising GOP stars. Senators Marco Rubio and Rand Paul offered starkly different visions of the way forward for the Republican Party. Here's a sampling of what they had to say.
We don't need a new idea. There is an idea. The idea is called America, and it still works.
The GOP of old has grown stale and moss-covered. I don't think we need to name any names, do we? Our party is encumbered by an inconsistent approach to freedom.
Chief Washington correspondent Dick Stevenson is here with more. Dick, thanks for being here. Good to see you in New York.
Happy to be here.
So I was really impressed by these two speeches. I kind of couldn't help but feeling, especially in the case of Rand Paul, like I was actually watching the stump speech for 2016.
Well, more than that, I think this was the first engagement in the Republican presidential primary campaign of 2016. Two guys who have clearly indicated an interest in running with, as you saw in that clip, some pretty distinct views of the way forward for the Republican Party right now and for the conservative movement.
I was impressed by Rand Paul coming out and basically saying, it's about freedom. It's about expanding freedom, whether we're talking about, Americans' freedom from drones, which he started off with, which was kind of interesting. But, he did that filibuster based on that issue. And then he went to even freedom for kids not being arrested for nonviolent drug offenses, which went kind of over only to half the audience, it felt like, in that hall. A much more traditional speech from Marco Rubio.
Right. Look, with Rand Paul, you're getting a kind of libertarian populism, which is a different kind of thing for the Republican Party right now. Both of these guys were elected in 2010 with a lot of Tea Party support. You'd expect them really to have quite similar worldviews, but they don't. Marco Rubio is in many ways putting himself forward as the more traditional establishment conservative, a guy with very mainstream conservative views on social issues and economic issues, more or less on foreign policy issues as well. Rand Paul is really something different. This libertarianism that really defined his father is still very evident in the way that he talks about both domestic politics and international politics, and it doesn't always fit neatly with the mainstream conservative brand right now.
It was impressive how he seemed to be reaching out to young people in a real way. The old GOP, the new GOP.
Well, his zinger at, of course, John McCain over the kind of stale, moss-covered, party of the past was, I think both retribution for McCain's statements after Rand Paul's filibuster last week, but also, I think, as you're suggesting, a turning point in the way that the party is thinking about where its future really lies, and an attempt on the part of Rand Paul to reach out to a different kind of audience, not necessarily the kind of voter that they've been able to attract in the past, but the kind that animated his father's presidential runs, which, if you remember, were made up of a very large proportion of young people drawn by his anti-war positions.
And if the party's going to rise to a national presidential level and get majorities nationally, they have to expand their tent.
Yeah, now you can argue about whether the kind of libertarian populism that Rand Paul is talking about is going to expand the tent or leave him as more of a fringe player. And I think part of what Rubio is doing is trying to establish himself as a more credible presidential candidate and potential president than Rand Paul would be.
Now, putting aside 2016, it's still a little ways off. In the here and now, with this budget battle that's unfolding right now with this president, with the Democrats, do these different competing views of what the Republican Party must do going forward actually offer different strategies for how to deal with that budget battle in the here and now?
Very interesting, Marcus, that these speeches took place at the same time that President Obama was up on the Hill talking to Senate Republicans and trying to reach out to them on the budget, immigration, and other issues. Neither of these two guys was there for that. But I think what you saw here was evidence of how hard it's going to be for Obama, and to the degree that the congressional leadership is interested, for the Republican leadership to get together with the White House on any kind of budget deal. Rand Paul came out in the speech at CPAC and talked about a 5-year balanced budget, eliminating the education department. And clearly Rubio, is also not in the mood to compromise on this kind of thing right now. So, I think think the chances of getting anywhere this year are still relatively slim. Certainly there wasn't anything you heard today in terms of outreach back to Obama after his attempt to engage the Republicans a little bit more.
Final question. Sometimes we see a divide between party leaders for both parties, Republicans and Democrats, in Washington, and party leaders out in the state who actually have to govern and make things happen. Do we see that kind of division in the Republicans today?
I think you really do. I mean, some of the most high-profile Republican governors, real conservatives, John Kasich in Ohio, Rick Scott in Florida, never mind Chris Christie in New Jersey, all taking steps to adopt Obama administration policies, whether it's on the health care law, Medicaid, other things that work for their states, that accept the Obama health care law, for example, as settled law at this point, something that neither the Ryan budget nor the sentiment at CPAC really accepts at all.
Excellent. Well, we'll keep watching. Thanks, Dick.
Absolutely.
That's all for now. I'm Marcus Mabry for the New York Times.